Good morning and welcome to the Culture War Podcast. I am your host today, Phil Labonte. Today we're going to be talking about veterans dissatisfied with the federal government. This is not a new story or something that we haven't covered here at Timcast, but today we have three guests, two of whom have a unique perspective on this topic. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Glenn, why don't you introduce yourself?
Phil, my name is Glenn Baker. Sing a little country music, and I'm one of those dissatisfied veterans that you're talking about. Life is not what I thought it would be. Doesn't seem to be the country that I fought for. And I'm finding out from going across the country that there's a lot of people that feel the same way. Appreciate you having me.
Cheers. Nate?
I'm Nate Cain, and I am also a U.S. Army veteran. I went through quite a bit of an experience of seeing what happens when our government doesn't do the right thing, and then when they go against those that try to do the right thing. And so, we'll be talking about some of that today. It's going to be an interesting story.
Travis, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm not a veteran, but I am very dissatisfied. I think there's obviously a lot of things that have gone on recently that have opened a lot of people's eyes and a ton of dissatisfaction. I do have family members that are and have been active military, and I have a lot of friends, obviously. And that list is growing rapidly with how many people Glenn's introduced me to, of just people in general, but more specifically veterans that are very dissatisfied. But thanks for having me on the show, man.
You're welcome. We got Kellen here pushing the buttons today. Kellen's like, I'm not even jumping in yet.
What's up, guys?
So I think that it's part of the zeitgeist today is the federal government has put itself into a position where criticism falls very easily on it. And I don't think there's a lot of people that have a lot of incentive to defend the federal government unless they're actually in the government. So, Glenn, why don't you go ahead and lay out the things that you've done for the Finish the Fight movie, the initiative that you got started.
Well, I can go back a little bit. I'm a Desert Storm veteran. So 35 years ago? Mm-hmm. Is that right? 1990, 90, yeah, about almost 35 years ago.
I was told there'd be no math today, so I don't know why.
You were lied to.
I was lied to.
Yeah. Well, and I had to do that in my head, and I've still got morning thing going on in my head. So 34 years ago, I was called up when my son was 4 months old. I was at my fourth wedding anniversary when I got the call and went and fought. You know, we just did what we were told to do. As an Army guy, the one that raised my hand and swore to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States, that's what we did. And we went and did our job. And I was one of these guys for the longest time that thought, okay, I'm a soldier. I'm a veteran. My country loves me and cares about me. And oh my gosh, I've only one time in my life have I been that wrong before, and that's when it came to the pandemic. So I found out that this is not the country that I fought for in 2017. And we can go into that here in a little bit if you'd like to. Here's where the biggest mistake I think the government officials are making. We fought for this country, and I would fight for this country again. I would never put on a uniform for the government, though. And the government forgets. There was a time, 35 years ago now for me, 36, where I raised my hand and I swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And what you're talking about right now is a government that is not even hiding. It's evil, if you will. It's bias. It's lust for power, lust for money. It's all out in the open, and it just blows my mind. They're not even secret about it anymore. If you can open your eyes, you see it every day. So we're here to expose some of that.
Yeah. I do think that we were talking a little bit earlier. The government, the federal government at least, had long ago exceeded its constitutional authority. I think that whether you're talking about all of the regulation that happens inside the United States, the authority that Congress has abdicated to the president to make war, to engage in warfare and foreign police actions, if you will, that's totally unconstitutional. And there's not a whole lot of of debate about whether it's constitutional. There are people that'll debate that it's legal. People that'll say, well, the War Powers Act or what have you, the authorization from Congress for the president to execute the global war on terror. They'll say, well, that was legal. But I'm not personally all that. I'm not personally all that convinced that they're actually legal, because things that are offensive to the Constitution are invalid. Nate, why don't you go ahead and take it from here a little bit about your experience?
So one of the things that recently was adjudicated by the Supreme Court, which I think was a very, very important ruling, is the one on Chevron deference.
Absolutely.
It is completely, upended this notion that these federal agencies get to regulate and create law. They're not the legislators. But that's what's been going on, and that is a huge part of the problem. Now, Congress is not without their own issues, because they have the power of the purse, and yet they have not used it to stop a lot of this. We've got, in fact, one of the things I was very disappointed with, in this current Congress, was when they basically decided to continue to fund Section 702 of FISA, which has allowed for unwarranted spying on American citizens. And I don't care what anybody says. This is not Nate Cain saying this. Is federal judges saying this. There was a federal ruling where they said that over 458,000 times Section 702 was illegally used to spy on American citizens. Now that's pretty crazy and pretty bold, because I was read onto that program at one point in time in my career. And I remember being concerned and going, wow, this is some pretty heavy duty surveillance capabilities. And I remember thinking, what if they abuse it? But I would never have thought of abusing it, because they made it very clear to us that if we did, we were looking at 10 years in prison because of deprivation of rights under color of law. And yet, what have we seen? We've seen not a single person at the FBI go to jail for misusing the system. We've not seen any accountability whatsoever. And it's been used, like I said, and it's been used against people on the right and people on the left. That's something I think that's really important, because there should be, a broad scope of Americans that are, being, hey, what's going on here?
Isn't that traced clear back to the Patriot Act, though?
It is. Yeah, it is.
I remember when that act was passed, and I was just dumb enough to believe my country loved me. I'm like, okay, so they need to do this to be able to find terrorism. That was such a load of junk. Mm-hmm. It was actually the way that they could take advantage of something I believe they caused, but we were told it wasn't. It was an act of terror, in order to spy on us.
Even if we were to go and steelman the government's argument, right, that the Patriot Act initially was intended to catch terrorists in the U.S., I don't think that there's any argument that it has greatly exceeded those constraints. So if you want to, not that we're particularly concerned with steelmanning the federal government's arguments, especially on a day like today when we're covering these kind of topics, but if you do want to say, okay, well, let's hope the government has the best interest of the American people. And 20 years ago or 25 years ago, when the Patriot Act was passed, it was more reasonable to think that. Mm-hmm. Then now today, it's very clear to most, maybe not most Americans, but to a plurality of Americans, that the federal government doesn't do things that it's particularly concerned with, that are particularly concerned with protecting the rights of the American people, or at least the bureaucracies aren't, right? So your FBI, your NSA, your bureaucracies that are charged under Homeland Security with protecting the American people and protecting the country. They're not so concerned with the rights of the Americans. But if you're going to steelman it and say, well, they intended to do the right thing, there's not much of an argument that it's been, that it's exceeded the limitations that the arguments they initially made.
Yeah. I think we're living in a world now where we are seeing an example of that law of unintended consequences. They pass these rules, they pass these laws, some act or whatever, and they think, oh, we're going to use it for good, but they don't think about, they don't do proper risk management on these laws, right? They don't go, okay, how could this be abused? And they really should. On any law that's created, they should absolutely consider if the wrong person or the wrong administration got a hold of this, how could they misuse it against the American people? One of the things that changed in the world since 9/11 is we now have a politicized Department of Justice. That wasn't that way back then, and it is now. I mean, I can tell you firsthand, I was working there, and I absolutely saw at the FBI a very politicized, a very woke environment.
If we can get Travis to jump in here, how did you get involved with Glenn and Nate, and what to what extent is your filmmaker status? What was the outcome you were looking for to start telling this story?
Yeah, that's a great question. Man, I just love making movies. But what ended up happening was through a mutual friend who was just a friend for a few days. Glenn knew her for 1 or 2 days. I knew her for 3 or 4 days at the time, which is the funny part. As I went to I go to this church in Georgia, and Shannon Weimer was someone who was interested in investing in a project that I'm working on. And she was like, hey, this is really great. I think timing for me is bad, but let's keep in touch. I think I can connect you with some people. And then literally the next day or two, she meets Glenn, and Glenn's like, I have a filmmaker that I want to make a music video, and I just don't think it's the right move right now. So she goes, I know a guy, so I don't know how you got connected with Shannon, but it was just a day or two after I had talked to her about a project and all the stuff that I'm working on. And I'm working on some really crazy things right now in the film industry that I think are really going to revolutionize things, wildly revolutionize the film industry.
Yeah, that was just an outside, a friend of a friend that she had.
Yeah.
So it's that circle of influence. It's a matter of networking, which is something.
Into the mic a little.
Yeah, it was a matter of that networking is something that I do well, and so a friend of a friend introduced me to her, and she introduced me to you, and it was. And 2 weeks later, we're filming a music video.
Yeah, I mean, we talked. I wasn't really interested in making a music video because I'm like more of a feature film. I would do episodic, but more of a feature film is kind of where my heart is, and but he's one of those rare cases where Glenn tells a story in his music. So I was like, okay, I actually want to do this project. Let's do it. So we had a great conversation. We dove into it. And to answer your question, which is what did I want out of it? Nothing really. I mean, initially it was just like, I believe in this guy. I think he's an undiscovered talent that needs to be discovered. His music is meaningful. It's great. He's got a solid band. But then after the music video, he goes, I think there's more here. And I was like, all right, what are you aiming at? And he goes, I think there's a movie here. I'm like, okay, now you're speaking my language. The music video turned out to be kind of a short movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's cool. It's about a guy who goes to war and, signs on the dotted line and then meets a battle buddy, and they go in to battle together, and the battle buddy ends up dying. And it's about, coming home and dealing with that, right? How do you heal physically, emotionally, mentally, all that stuff. So it's just a very touching song, and I love the story. So when we started making the movie, I'm like, all right, what's the premise? He goes, I don't know. I'm like, well, if we're going to make a hour and 50-minute long feature film, we got to kind of know what it's about. No
script, just wing it. Let's go.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happened at the beginning. Yeah.
Let's gladiator this thing where you come in with, a few ideas, and then we just make a whole film out of it, which is really what ended up happening. And I think I recut the first half hour 6 times. And y'all, we made this in 90 days. Documentaries can take 10, 15 years.
Sure, yeah.
And some, of course, take, 12 to 18 months. We did this in 90 days, which might be a record. I don't know. But it went from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. And I didn't have the expectation of getting anything out of it. And I still don't know if I will or have. But I agree with the vast majority of things in the film. I think it's a powerful message that needs to be heard, and I think I'm just proud and glad that I was a part of it. I think more than anything.
Well, I think once I told you my story and we really had time to get to know each other, it just developed around that.
Yeah.
My story is, I thought, was pretty unique. And as we went out and meeting people across the country, I'm finding out it's not quite as unique as I thought it was. So I met Nate Cain. I was actually interviewed on Nate's show about my music video. And after the end of the interview, he and I was talking, and he told me his story. And I'm like, oh, my God. I thought I'd been jacked over. This dude had been jacked over and tried to be murdered twice. And I need your story in my movie. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to take part in it, and he absolutely did. And so it's evolved from there. Finished this fight, Diary of a Pissed Off American Soldier, and I'm finding out that it's more than me.
There's a lot of pissed off American soldiers.
There's a lot of them.
In the movie. Even just in the movie, but of course across the country and across the world, there's a lot of pissed off people.
How many stories do you guys cover in the movie?
Primarily, the first 25 minutes is what happened to me. We've built a foundation about the pissed off American soldier, and I can tell you that in a very abbreviated version. In 2017, I got a knock on my door in July, 4:30 in the afternoon. Was getting ready to go out and work. I had a life insurance agency at the time, was getting ready to go out and meet some clients. Had nothing on but a pair of shorts and flip-flops. Answer the door, and there's 10 cops and a SWAT team. And I'm like, that's exactly what I did. Okay, what's this? How can I help you guys? They said, well, we had a domestic disturbance call at this address, and it made me chuckle because I live alone. And I said, and I told him that I live alone. How's that possible? He said, it happens all the time.
Did they have body? Okay, I've always wondered this. Did they have body cams on? Because that was a complete and utter lie.
Dude, I don't know. I never have been in trouble, so I wasn't looking for what should have been obvious. I'm just like, what the crap's going on here?
But who comes with 10 cops and a SWAT team?
Yeah.
To a domestic disturbance call when that it's a lie. The whole thing was a farce.
I actually asked them, where's the camera? When I'm being handcuffed, where's the camera? He said, what are you talking about? I said, this is absolutely nuts. Who's hiding filming this thing?
Have you found out who made the call?
There was no call.
There was no call. No, there was no domestic disturbance. That's the crazy thing, is they show up and say there's a domestic disturbance call, and there's no call. They just wanted a reason to knock on the door and say, oh, it's no big deal. Come on out here. And then, when you step out your door, they got you.
Yeah.
So they just wanted an excuse to knock on his door and have him feel like, oh, it's not a big deal. And then, of course, finish your story, but come to find out the whole thing is ridiculous.
Yeah. So I step out the door and I'm thrown against a wall and handcuffed and taken to Fort Lauderdale, Broward County Jail. Spent 23 days in Broward County. Didn't have an attorney the whole time.
What were you charged with?
They wouldn't even tell me at the beginning. They didn't know. It was an out-of-state warrant. The charge was titled receiving property under a false pretense, but nobody could tell me what that meant. I didn't see an attorney for 23 days. I was then transferred to North Carolina, where I found out at that point, when I saw an attorney finally, that it was an embezzlement charge, and I'd never embezzled anything from anybody. The attorney finally got me some discovery a couple of days later, and I found a sheet of paper, a handwritten receipt in my former business partner's handwriting with his address, home address on it, that he had taken $22,000 from a client that I'd given him when I exited that company in 2014. So he had embezzled from a client that I'd given him when I left the company 3 years prior to me being arrested. I didn't even know it had happened. And I'm thinking, okay, I'll be out of here in no time. 51 more days. I spent 73 days in 2 different jail cells before I got myself out. And basically, I got myself out. I threatened my attorney.
Was there no chance to post bail or anything?
$25,000 cash bond. And remember this, the first 23 days, no attorney. They wouldn't let me access a cell phone even. I didn't have any telephone numbers memorized. Nobody knew where I was at. My kids thought I'd died. I disappeared. Was gone from the face of the earth.
For weeks, right?
Yeah.
Before you made a phone call.
3 weeks plus.
That is just...
Yeah, 3 weeks plus.
I've heard the story 250,000 times because I edited the movie, for goodness sake. And we filmed the story. You got to see the movie if you haven't already. But he tells the story and we tell it in more detail. And we kind of did it in a funny way. You ever see a Drunk History
Yeah.
Comedy Center. So we kind of did that. So I wanted to be like palpable for people, because when you're listening to it, you're like, "There's no freaking way. There's no way he didn't get an attorney for 3 weeks. There's no way he wasn't able to make a phone call for 3 weeks. They would not even give him his cell phone to get phone numbers so he could make a phone call."
Oh, check this out. Finally, on the 8th day, I saw a judge, the first 8th day, and told him that I hadn't got to use my cell phone, and they were requiring a court order. He's like, "I have never written a court order for a cell phone. I'm not going to do it." And he made his mind up. And after that, the bailiff came over to me from the side. He heard the story. He's like, "Listen, let me go talk to him." So this big, burly bailiff goes behind the podium there and convinces the judge to write a court order that demands them to access my phone for telephone numbers. So the next day, I hand it to the jailer, the court order. They come back that afternoon. I'm like, "Well, where's the phone?" He's like, "You're not going to get it. The phone died, and we're just not going to charge it." That's our justice system, boys and girls.
Yep.
So they made the judge write a court order, and then they didn't honor it.
I still have the court order to this day, and that was on that paper that I showed you that I'd written in my diary.
And what's wild about that is you didn't do it. So they're treating this guy like garbage because they think that he's a piece of garbage. And then it turns out, no, he's just a normal guy who served our country and got ramrodded.
Even still, like an embezzlement charge. What do you think do you think that was, do you think that they were lying about the embezzlement charge? And if so, what do you think the reason for them coming to pick you up was?
I honestly don't know the reason. Now, my former partner was a retired pastor, 49 years in the pulpit, 25 years on TV. His son-in-law is a state representative in North Carolina. And I had found out when I'd been in business for a year or so that people either loved him or they hated him. And the guy turned out to be a shyster behind a pulpit. And so they came to him and they interviewed him from the client that made the complaint. This guy convinced this client that I took the money and left the state. This happened 7 months after I'd already been gone, but he was good at what he did. So why did they do that? First of all, the embezzlement charge, because there was a contract between me and a client for a down payment, should have never been anything more than civil. There was no criminal case there at all. Second, they had zero evidence that I was involved or even knew that it had happened. While I'm there, I'm signing documents. They're looking through my bank records. They're looking through everything. There's nothing that shows I took that money because it didn't happen. 73 days. The week before I got out, I caught an infection in that jail, and they didn't treat it for 6 days. And I'm assuming I can say this. It went into my right testicle. I woke up one morning, had one that was the size of an orange, and no treatment. Finally, on the 6th day after I caught that infection, it went into my right ear. And the nurse finally saw me, gave me an antibiotic, said, "You'll get another one tomorrow." And that day, my attorney came to me and said, "Listen, Glenn, you're going to be here for a while, probably another year and a half."
In a jail with no charges filed, or with no...
The charge had been filed. I'd never gone in front of the judge except to read the charge.
Mm-hmm.
There had been no hearing, nothing. But he said, "You're going to be here another year and a half. They have no evidence against you. We've gone through everything. They're not ready to let you go. In about 6 months, more than likely, at that time, they'll offer a plea. If you plead not guilty, you'll be here another year, waiting on a trial at least. Or if you can gather up 25 grand, we'll let you go. There's not a bond. You're out of state. You're a flight risk. It's $25,000 cash."
You were living in Florida, right?
Yeah, but this was in North Carolina. They had extradited me to North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long did the extradition take?
23 days from Broward County, and then I was in North Carolina. I was in the back of a van for 2 days, handcuffed and shackled in the feet, sitting in the back of a van to go to another jail.
So for 48 hours, you were in a van.
Well, we stopped in Valdosta, Georgia.
Okay.
And spent the night in another jail that looked like a gulag.
Well, it's not that long of a drive. Why did it take 2 days?
Because they were picking other people up to deliver.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, you're just a product at that point.
That must have been so much fun.
Oh, you know what was fun, though? There was a funny story, and I don't think I ever told you this. So I didn't have any telephone numbers. They still hadn't accessed my cell phone. So these two jailers, a man and a woman, black man and black woman, probably mid to late 20s, early 30s. And we're driving, and I just do what Glenn does, and I'm talking to him, and I make friends. And I finally convinced the woman. I said, listen, they have not let me access my cell phone. I've got no numbers. I see you're on your Facebook on your phone. Could I ask you to do me a favor? And she's like, what? I said, get on your messenger and send a message to Kenny Dietrich.
Oh my God, he's in the documentary.
He's in the documentary. I said, send a
way.
message to Kenny Dietrich. Now, he's going to think you're a scam. So here's what I want you to say. Tell him that you've got Glenn Baker in the back of a van, shackled and handcuffed on the way to North Carolina. And he's going to say, nah, it's a scam. Tell him, Glenn told me to tell you that. Do you remember the time when you told some customers to go find Glenn standing underneath a Dodge Neon? And she did it. And I'm the only one could ever came up with that.
Sure.
He used to make fun of my height all the time. And he told some clients, go find Glenn on the other side of this car lot, standing underneath the Dodge Neon. That's how you'll know he's there. And so she told him that. And all of a sudden, I got my first telephone number through a jailer so that I could call somebody when I got to that other jail. But it's one of these stories. It's like, I never would have believed it. I never would have believed that happens in the United States. Man, I'm a middle-aged businessman, never been in trouble, and lost my freedom without any evidence that I'd done anything wrong, only an accusation. And that's today's America. And quite frankly, Phil, that's what it took for me to be woken up out of the matrix. Because up to that point, I thought my government loved me, had my best interest at heart, wouldn't hurt me. I had no idea.
So you were talking to one of the jailers that was on their cell phone in the van with you.
In the van.
So you never told me that part of the story. That is some, well, maybe not Nate Cain, James Bond level, but that's pretty slick, man.
That's slick,
I
baby.
like that.
And that's how I
Kenny
got the
Dietrich
first
thing,
number.
That's slick, bro.
That's how I got the first number. And then Kenny called and got my sister's number. So that's how I got number. I never
told me that.
I never got them from my phone.
That's such a good part of the story.
I know. I don't know how I didn't think of it.
That's like Timcast exclusive.
That gives whole new context to the joke in the movie about you standing under the Dodge Neon. So now I know.
That's true.
You got to see the movie, y'all. Go
It's
finish
hilarious.
this fight.us. Buy the movie. Watch Kenny Dietrich. That part alone is worth.
And I'm glad
$11.
And I'm glad that you guys did the movie the way you did, because otherwise I would have left the movie completely pissed off and unsatisfied. There's a lot of comedy that's spread throughout the movie, and it's good.
Good.
So, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but that's how
I don't
it all
remember the
began.
question because you can talk for an hour about
I know,
nothing.
yeah.
I'm trying to piece together the story. I'm looking for what the actual you said that there was the accusation from someone else that was probably because of your former business partner. And I'm wondering, I'm trying to figure out if there was a pretense that you were arrested under, or if there was something that they were actually interested in that was beyond what you were told.
I wish it was that interesting. I wish I had some kind of crazy knowledge that somebody was trying to get to. At the end of the day, what I think happened is this pastor embezzled money from these people and convinced them that I had done it because I was out of the state already. He was just trying to get out from being in trouble.
I guess what I'm looking for is some reason for the both the Broward County and the North Carolina Justice Departments to behave in the way that they did, right? Because if a story says, if you're dealing with someone that has a negative interaction with the police, if there's one jurisdiction that is doing something that is wrong or is somehow behaving outside the law, that's understandable. For two different jurisdictions to be,
Wasn't that the weird thing that they were like in cohorts together against the guy that didn't do anything?
Yeah, that's what. And usually, I would imagine there would be a story that would be told. One would be kind of unaware of the motivation of the one that's actually looking to prosecute, right? So it was North Carolina that really wanted to get their hands on you, and I imagine Broward County would be unaware or uninterested in what it is that North Carolina was after, and so for them to show up with a SWAT team at your house on a domestic and then wrap you up when there was clearly no one else inside the house.
Yep.
You live alone. There's no one there. If someone calls in a domestic to actually be the impetus to get you into custody, I'm just trying to figure out, or I'm wondering what it is, or wondering if there was something else that was going on, or what how it was that you could get both of these two separate jurisdictions to behave in such nefarious ways.
I wish I knew the answer to that. What I think I've seen is that stuff like this happens way more than we realize.
Oh yeah.
That it's par for the course.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I think this is happening every day, and not everybody can make a movie about it. I think that's just the crazy thing, is that he's just one of a million people that are telling the story. I think this is happening all the time. And look, I'm not trying to dunk on the police. We need them, and they need to be trained correctly. I think that's one of the biggest problems. The whole defund the police thing was such a crime because police need more training. You can go through like a basic, right? And I have never gone through it. So don't quote me on. Yeah. So they go through a training and then they're like, go out into the wild. And depending on where you are, it could be a lot less wild. Or it could be a lot more wild, but you get jaded really quick and they don't get enough training. I think we need to.
They certainly don't get enough training on the Constitution. In fact,
That's true,
I would
too.
say that
A lot of times they don't know the law.
I'd say they don't. They don't know. I think a lot of them don't know the authority that the Constitution has over every other law. And so we see this problem in the military too. We see this problem in the military. We see it in anywhere where you have lines of authority, right? It's in the FBI. It's in the local police, the sheriff's departments, everywhere, which is that people get used to obeying orders.
Yeah.
And they just go ahead and do it. In fact, there have been studies that have been done on this after World War II. There's a famous one, I can't remember the name of it, but where they had a bunch of students at the university. There were two kind of famous tests, and I remember learning this in my psychology class. But one of them was really interesting. They got a bunch of students to pretend they were hooked up to electrodes, and you remember the story, right? And they had the teachers turn the volume up on the electricity, and of course the kids were all acting and everything. But there was a mark on there that said "Don't go beyond," and when they were told to go beyond it, they did.
They did. Just
80% of them.
Just so long as authority said it was okay.
That's right.
The authority figure said, no, it's okay for you to do this.
And afterwards, these teachers had PTSD.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't understand why they did that either.
Yeah.
And of course, the kids were screaming and passing out and all, totally going.
I love that.
But it showed a
crazy
very,
experiment.
very important thing. They were trying to understand how
I
Nazi
believe they
guards.
stopped. I think that this experiment, they said they couldn't do it anymore after that happened. I'm not positive.
No, it was absolutely never allowed again because it did harm psychologically to these teachers. So it's kind of crazy. But the other one that was similar was they had two sets of groups of students that were from the same class. And one of them were the jailers, and the other one were the prisoners, and they were like locked in for like a period of time. And they found certain behaviors that developed in this environment, and so I think there's a real threat of that anytime you have authority. And so that's why I think it's important for anybody who's in a position of authority. Number one, there needs to be consequences if they abuse that authority, and it should be very severe, so that it puts a check on them, so they think, oh, I don't want to overstep and violate this person's rights. And the problem is that in the case of what happened to Glenn, absolutely the FBI should have investigated that for deprivation of rights under color of law. And in some cases of where there's video or there's it becomes a national spectacle or something, they will get involved. But what about the FBI when they do it?
Yeah,
Nobody
has
goes after them.
Has there been? Your lawyer wasn't interested in suing, or you don't have a
Rather,
lawyer
my
that's interested
lawyer
in suing?
he was a clod.
Well, yeah, but so I mean, Fair enough, but you haven't. You made. You've got a movie out. Have you been in contact with any other lawyers interested in suing Broward County or suing North Carolina? I mean, I imagine if this story, there's got to be plenty of evidence, and this seems like there's all kinds of room to at least attempt to get some kind of compensation for the illegal actions of a what amounts to small town abuse of power.
Oh, it absolutely is. I was in a position when I got home. I'd lost everything. I'd lost my home, lost my car. It was repoed while I was gone. 80% of my life insurance agency was gone because of a financial accusation. And the night after I got home, that infection that I told you about went into my right eye and destroyed my cornea. So I'm blind in my right eye for a year. For a year, I didn't care whether I lived or died. Now, I'm telling you, I wasn't suicidal. I was just defeated. I was defeated. I looked at a few and talked with a few attorneys about it. I didn't really want to raise a bunch of Cain until it was dismissed. And it took them 3 years to raising Cain.
There he is right there.
It took them 3 years before they dismissed the charge with prejudice. They had nothing anyway.
Okay, so they dismissed it with prejudice then.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
That means nothing can be brought for, if you don't know, if it's dismissed with prejudice, that means that they can't bring the charges anymore, or this is all just a garbage prosecution.
Yeah. It's gone. But the attorneys that I did speak to had told me, the North Carolina attorneys especially, that the way their system is set up and the laws are set up in North Carolina, if you get out of jail alive, you really have no recourse. They've done their job. There's nothing they can do.
Well, yeah, for a defense attorney, but you don't have the ability to.
I was talking to people who could sue them. I just went crazy, brain dead on that term. But yeah, the people that could sue them, and we're used to suing the government, and nobody would pick it up. But on their behalf, I was defeated, and I didn't try real hard. I just spent time healing. And I do think from the release of this movie, and it has nothing to do with why we've done it, but somebody's going to see this and say, you know what? I think I can help.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I mean, hopefully someone watching will know someone or something like that, because the story that you outlined, it does seem like that kind of abuse of power is ripe for a lawsuit. And, this is the United States, where there is no shortage of lawyers. There are plenty of lawyers in the U.S. and
far too many.
I would imagine there'd be someone motivated to, especially considering what seems like such an open and shut case.
Well, you would think so. Broward County is completely corrupt anyway. But think about this: being held for 23 days, not knowing why you were being held, not allowed to see an attorney, don't see a judge for 8 days when the judge does. So
you couldn't see an attorney for almost 3 weeks, huh? You never had the option of seeing an attorney.
I had nobody to call, had no money, couldn't get a hold of an attorney on my own. And then when the judge gave the court order, they wouldn't access my cell phone, so I couldn't get it that way. And then they didn't give me an attorney. See, by law, you get an attorney when you're arrested.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just the law. And they said, it's not our deal. It's an out-of-state warrant.
Yeah, and they never Mirandized him.
Never Mirandized.
So he never was, right to remain silent, right to an attorney.
Did you have to wait to see a lawyer once you got to North Carolina?
No, that happened. Well, I got in the evening, and it happened the next day.
Okay.
So
to extradite you from Florida to North Carolina, you had no representation for that process at all.
The 8th day when I did see that judge, he told me, you have the right to file a plea against or not to file a plea, to not agree with the extradition.
Fight the extradition, yeah.
Yeah, but you're going to be here a minimum of 45 days, and it may be longer than that. Or if you agree to extradition, you could still be here for 30 days, but then they'll extradite you and you can find out what's going on. And I said, I don't want to be here no matter what, but I want to get to the bottom of this. I have done nothing wrong. And so I agreed to extradition.
I want to say something on you were asking about, like, why haven't you gotten an attorney to go after him and all of that? Even after what I went through, it's like the last thing you want to do is have to live through that all over again. And there is I know this happens with, like, for example, women who get, raped or sexually assaulted, right? Oftentimes they don't even want to report it or
Sure, yeah.
or deal with it because they don't want to talk about it. It's traumatic, it's traumatizing, and I know that happens. And to be honest with you, the process of getting an attorney when you have been wronged, especially to go after the government, you'd be surprised at how many attorneys are just not interested. It takes certain types of attorneys, and usually they want money up front. And so, and when you're already financially, you've just been basically screwed and you got no money now, it's really hard to find an attorney that's going to take that on, without some money up front. And that is a big problem in our justice system, without a doubt.
What would even be the advantage to the lawyer to take on a case like that? I mean, obviously you would win money for the case, and obviously, lawyers at that point, they work for
it's a risk.
30 to 40%. But their career could be, stained if they're going around suing municipalities.
Sure, yeah.
That seems like it would be a problem for a lawyer. So I don't even know if they would want to take on that case.
I never found one. Never found one. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Here's the great news, Phil. God has restored me. I've got more now than I had when I lost it. I've got a great career. I get to go all over the country and sing, and now I get to go around the country and talk about what we're doing here. So I'm not on a vendetta. I truthfully am pro-cop and pro-law and order. The challenge with the law and what you were talking about a while ago in the Constitution is very simple. We've added amendment after amendment after amendment, but it's very simple. The legal system is not.
Yeah.
If you were to stack laws on a piece of paper up in a pile, how high would that pile be? I mean, law after law after law after law. Nobody knows what the law really is.
Yeah.
And it's done that way by design. I mean, that's the way they graft things. That's the way the money's grafted. That's the way the laundering takes place. That's the way the power is kept. Keep them confused and they'll never know what they're doing. Same way with tax code. Tax code is incredibly ridiculous.
Yeah.
We are in a system of government that our founding fathers did not design. It's not even really a good facsimile of it anymore. We have like an oasis it's a vision of freedom, but it's nothing tangible. Our freedoms are very, very fragile right now, and I want to help spread that word to people, not to cause people to have fear, but for them to pay attention that freedom isn't free, Phil, but it's also not cheap. It has always cost something. And I'm 57 years old. It was easy my whole life until this happened to me. Now it's not. Now I'm paying attention, and now I know that it's got to be a price paid in order for us to keep it for our kids and our grandkids, and I'm willing to pay that price. I could be sitting at home on my butt in the couch right now, just saying, hey, somebody else will do this. But what I've done, and because God tapped me on the shoulder and said, Glenn, I want you to get involved, I put every dime I have into something that's going to wake people up across the country, but also give them hope. This is not a hopeless situation. This is still the dadgum United States of America, and we're tough. We just kind of need to be slapped a little bit and woken up.
Nate, why don't you go ahead and lay out how you got involved with Glenn and got involved with the movie?
Sure. So Glenn actually.
Hold on to your caps, ladies and gentlemen, because it's about to get crazy.
So Glenn, I have my own podcast now, the Raising Cain Show, and so I had Glenn on the show to talk about his music video, and after, like he said, after the interview, and it was a really good interview, we talked and just were sharing our stories, and so I shared with him about what happened to me, and I think it was like maybe a day or two later, he calls me up and he goes, "Hey, do you want to be in my documentary?" He says, "I think your story needs to be heard," and so I agreed, and I think you guys probably would have expected
10 minutes.
10 minutes or whatever.
I mean, really.
Turned in like an hour, 2 hour interview, and of course, they had to edit it and all of that. But my story is one that I think a lot of people probably haven't heard, and a lot of that is because of what I was just talking about. Is that after you go through a traumatic experience, kind of the last thing you want to do is extend it. You want to get back to your life. You want to get back to some semblance of normality. And in my case, what happened was I've worked basically for the government either through, I was a soldier, and then I ended up going to work for the Defense Department as both a contractor and as a government employee for most of my career. And I was actually working for Marfor Cyber, which is we were doing hacking, essentially going after hackers, hacking our national critical infrastructure. And I had some great training at the NSA, had been read on to things like FISA and all these intelligence authorities and everything. And it was like, kind of a really exciting time in my career. And then I got an offer I just couldn't refuse. The FBI, a contractor, called me and they said, "Hey, we want somebody with your skills, and we've had a hard time filling this position. Would you please consider interviewing?" And then they offered me a number. I was like, whoa, it's twice my salary. It's like, how do you turn that down? So I left a job that I really loved to go work for the FBI. And I was excited. The day I showed up for my fingerprinting at the FBI, man, I was so excited because I was like, this is the pinnacle of my career. I was making more money than I'd ever made. I had total respect for the FBI. I've got members of my own family that are in law enforcement. And I've always had a respect for law enforcement. I've always looked at the FBI as like, they are the premier law enforcement agency of the U.S. And what I discovered after I started working there was that it was completely politicized. It was very woke. And then of course,
What year was this?
This was 2016, 2017.
Okay, yeah.
So, right around 2017, I started seeing things that were, that was when you started seeing the FBI was investigating everything, Congress was investigating everything from Uranium One to Benghazi to the Hillary Clinton email server, all these things, and these scandals started, happening. And one day I walk into the office, and I worked in Washington, D.C., not at the J. Edgar Hoover building, at a non-disclosed location where the Information Assurance Division was. And my job was, I was hired as a subject matter expert in cybersecurity to architect and implement and deploy a new vulnerability management system that would be across the FBI enterprise-wide, all their field offices and satellite divisions and everything. So it's a pretty huge, contract. But I come in one day, and my government supervisor is having a, kind of a hushed conversation with one of my colleagues. And so, we were all, had a good relationship. I walk over, I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he tells me that he's seen these transcripts, or that he had heard about these transcripts that somebody had seen, where we had an internal system within the FBI where, any communications, it's kind of like Zoom, but it's all on the classified side.
Sure.
And the FBI has the most advanced document retention system I've ever seen. And including when you have those conversations, it records it and then transcribes it and then dumps those transcripts. Well, apparently somebody had seen those transcripts of a conversation from the folks on the 7th floor. That's where all the leadership of the FBI is. And they were talking about the investigation into Hillary. And what they saw, or what the words that were, all throughout this thing, were words like treason. They were saying things like, this is too big. It was so big that it could, bring down the government. They were talking about things like that they were going to basically shut down their investigation because they were concerned. They thought for sure she was going to be president. I mean, that's what everybody believed. And they thought there was going to be retribution. So they decided to cover up these crimes by essentially making these investigations go away. So when I hear this, I've taken that oath. I've taken that oath as a soldier. Mm-hmm. I took that oath as a Navy civilian and as a Marine civilian. I can't ignore that. And because I do believe, I've got a firm belief that someday I'm going to stand before my Maker, and he's going to ask me about these things. And that it's not just when we do evil things, that alone is not evil. Along with that is when we know that we can do good and we don't do good. That's just as bad. And so I had to pray long and hard about it because I knew this was going to be a career killer for me. I knew that this was going to end my career, potentially cause me, harm to my freedom, possibly cause harm to my health. and certainly, cause emotional distress probably for my family. But I prayed long and hard about it, and I did go and I searched. I had access, so I went and I searched into their databases, and I looked for if there was any truth to these things that were being said. And I didn't discover those transcripts because by the time that I worked up the courage to look for it, those had probably already been compartmentalized. But what I found was a ton of evidentiary documents, including suspicious activity reports and things like that, where the FBI had been investigating with 3 different field offices. You had Little Rock, Arkansas, New York City field office, and the Washington field office had 3 separate investigations that were open into Hillary Clinton. They had a ton of these documents that had basically showed the entire money trail. And you had 4 crimes that were listed on these documents that basically that they had identified: money laundering, public corruption, securities and exchange fraud, and terrorism financing. So these are what are listed. These are what she was being investigated for. And they had evidence, and they had analyst notes in these documents that said a high probability of those crimes. So I'm thinking, when I first see this, these have case numbers. I'm going, oh, they're not covering this up. She's going to get indicted. And then you'll remember. So at first, I just kind of I made copies of these documents and on my computer, and it's on the classified side. And but I just kind of decided not to do anything. I was just going to wait and see. And then you'll remember, Comey comes out in front of the J. Edgar Hoover building, and he calls for a press conference. And then he's talking about the email server. And he's saying, oh, yes, we investigated. Now, we found thousands of classified documents on this email server, even after she, bleach bitted, was it 30,000 emails or whatever?
33,000, I think is that number.
So which that in and of itself is a crime. I mean, listen, I've had subpoenas come to me for documents in 27 years working for the government. There have been some times where I had gotten an email, from the security saying, hey, don't delete anything in your email because we have a leak or a spill or something like that, and we need to come examine it. So I, threat of going to jail, absolutely, I'm not going to do anything. But yeah, she had things deleted. And then, but even still, they still found thousands of classified emails. And he goes up, and this is where really caught my attention. He said, and we found 7 email chains that had special access programs. Now, most people have no idea what that even means. Mm. That's above top secret, okay? Top secret is the highest clearance, but then you have what they have called compartmentalization.
Yeah.
In my career, I've only maybe a couple times been read on to, SAPs. And SAPs are no joke. Like, when you go to review these documents, they're in a folder with a cover sheet. I don't get to handle these until I'm in a secured space. Now, I worked in a SCIF, but even in the SCIF, where everybody in there has a top secret clearance, I can't have these at my desk.
Yep.
All right, because they don't want somebody walking by and shoulder surfing and seeing what's in there because they don't have a need to know.
Yep.
So in that case, what happens is you go to your security officer. They first of all check to see if you're on the list. Then they do the combination, open up the safe, pull out that document, sign it out, hand carry it with you to a safe room where you can review these documents, and then they take them back. And so you're basically the only time you're ever alone with these documents is when you're sitting in this like little secured area. And so the fact that there were 7 of those, 7 email chains with these SAPs on them in her personal private email server in her home, there's no way you even get those out of a SCIF and out of the hands of the security manager without knowingly violating the law.
So you're saying this was part of the 33,000 emails that were deleted off her Gmail?
No.
Like her Gmail, right?
These ones were found. So who knows how many were in the deleted ones?
Thousands and thousands.
There could be. We don't know.
But this was on her personal email.
Her
like a Gmail.
No. This was a personal server that was being used to basically get around FOIA.
It was located in New Jersey, correct?
Yeah, Chappaquiddick.
Chappaquiddick, okay.
In the basement bathroom of her home.
Yes.
So she was stealing documents.
So we call that in the government we call that espionage.
Right.
The legal definition of espionage, it fits. and I'll remind you, at that time, there was a naval, I think it was a submariner,
Yep.
who had been thrown in jail for doing nothing more than taking a picture of his hot rack.
Yeah, because
Okay, a hot rack's basically it's like a cot,
Yeah.
yeah, it's anything on
Anything on the
submarine is
sub's considered class, yeah.
CSSEI, and so
So, yeah, this guy, though, got thrown in jail for something that really wasn't a national security threat, but yet Hillary Clinton has SAPs
Yeah.
on her server, and the only reason she has that server, because here's the thing, so in the government, everything has to be done on government computers. The reason is because of the Freedom of Information Act. They do not want some secret deals going on that cannot be verified at some point in time later.
Yeah.
And so the only reason that she had that server was to get around,
For sure.
that's my presumption, but that is what
So even the existence of it
Absolutely.
was nefarious.
absolutely.
sure.
Yeah. So this is all going down. You have Comey admit in that interview that there was evidence that you had foreign adversaries that had accessed that server. So I'm talking to my buddies, from my days working at NSA, and I'm like, hey man, you seen this? This certainly looks like to me, and we all had the same thought. It's a Dropbox. You put some documents there, foreign enemies hack into it, get those documents, and now you can claim, oh, I didn't know they were going to do
by
that.
hack you mean sign into it.
Right. So I saw this, and the moment I saw that, I knew at that moment that everything that I had heard was true. They were going to cover this up, because the next words out of his mouth are, but no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against somebody for this.
Yep.
She was just unsophisticated. And I'm like, are you kidding me? She was the Secretary of State.
Yep.
That means that she was at least, at minimum, a derivative classifier, which means she went through all the training. She had signed all of the, non-disclosure agreements and everything. She knew damn well what she was doing.
Yep, 100%.
So at this point, now I'm kind of like, crap, what the hell am I going to do? And so I ended up having to blow the whistle. And I remember the night I came home and I told my wife. And we were living in Maryland, Union Bridge at the time. And I come home and I was not my normal talkative self. And my wife, we're laying in bed and she goes, "What's up with you? You're not talking. You're not saying anything. Something's up. I can tell." And I just said, "I think I got to blow the whistle on the FBI." And she sits up and goes, "What?" And then her next question was, "Why does it have to be you? Why can't somebody else do it? You're just a contractor."
That's a fair question.
It is. And I told her, I said, if not me, then who's going to do it? I mean, clearly I'm not the only person that's seen this, but nobody, as far as I know, is willing to do that. I mean, these guys that work there at the Bureau that are government employees, they probably got pensions, families,
My question is, why would they have the backroom conversations in a place where it's being recorded?
I don't know. Well, it's
like
well
they screw
because
themselves.
because it was classified, and maybe they thought they could just compartmentalize it. But somebody saw those transcripts, and then basically.
Well, if it's on record, Nate, won't somebody see it eventually?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, look at all the
apparently
things.
that hasn't really mattered, because now
No.
here we are almost a decade later.
Yeah.
That's a
and
good point. Nobody really-
nobody's actually been charged. But I mean, nobody's never mind gone to jail or anything. But nobody's even been charged.
Yeah.
There's been there's been nothing from the DOJ. Even Donald Trump, who was the famous for lock her up.
Yeah.
Even his DOJ did nothing. I mean, it's possible.
Well, he never
that
had any control.
No,
That's
that's
that
fairly
was
obvious.
that was one of the things that really upsets me is when I hear these people say, "Oh, the FBI is supposed to be an independent agency." Bullcrap. That's not what the Constitution says. The president,
Well, the FBI is not in the Constitution, but
but he is the senior executive for all of the executive branch.
Yeah.
And there is nothing that is supposed to be out of his purview. The buck stops with him. So that is a fallacy that gets pushed, is that the FBI should be independent. No, we have a process of holding the president accountable. It's called impeachment. But really, everything else is supposed to be accountable to him.
yeah.
And but get back to the story. What happened after that was I ended up not knowing how to get this stuff out of there, because basically, as I started reviewing these documents, the names that are on a lot of these documents, people that knew about it, that were in the know, so they had to have been involved in somehow in the cover-up, were James Comey. You had Rod Rosenstein, who's the Deputy Attorney General, because he was the U.S. Attorney at the time of Uranium One, and a lot of the documents were about that and what happened with that. Uranium One was a Canadian mining company that basically was given permission by the CFIUS committee, who Hillary Clinton was the chair of, to be purchased by a Russian energy company called Rosatom. Now, the problem is the FBI knew before that decision was made that Rosatom was basically an agent of the Russian government. They had all of the evidence. They had an intelligence report that basically showed this, and it was from like 2009 or something like that, and it showed that they were involved in a bribery and kickback scheme trying to infiltrate our uranium supply chain. So they know this before they allow for this sell to happen. And the FBI director at the time that went on, Robert Mueller. Who was the deputy at that time? James Comey. So basically, you're talking like a huge, huge scandal here. Mm-hmm. And so I end up, I can't go through my normal chain of command to blow the whistle. I couldn't go through the IG either, because Michael Atkinson, who's the Intelligence Community Inspector General at the time of the Uranium One thing, he's the guy who's the head of the Public Corruption Unit for the FBI, which means he's in the know. So
at the time, I know this is like 2016. You said, did you feel like that there was the option of going to the press at all?
No, never. And I'll tell you why. Remember, you'd already seen Manning. You'd already seen what had happened, Julian Assange, and you'd already seen Snowden. You already had plenty of evidence that you leak something to the press, you're going to jail, or you're going to have to leave your country and flee. It's not an option. So there's no way in hell I'm going to jeopardize, myself in that way. And so but I knew the one option that I had, and I went and I looked at the federal law, and I'm like, okay, well, who can I go through if I don't go through this normal whistleblower process? Well, there was a law in the books that said that anybody who is a senior staffer to either the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence or the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, they could take classified information from anyone without any question. And I had a courier card, meaning I could carry classified documents out of the FBI anywhere so long as I was authorized. So what I did in a roundabout way to kind of protect myself was I reached out through a secondary person to get to Devin Nunes. And reached out to his office. We set up a clandestine meeting, and his senior staffer, George Pappas. Now, interestingly enough, at the time, Devin Nunes had two senior staffers. One was George Pappas, the other was Kash Patel.
Oh, okay.
So the likelihood that Kash has seen these documents is very high. And so I hope something good will come out of this eventually. But I ended up meeting with George Pappas. We went and picked him up, drove around the Capitol for about 3 hours while I debriefed him. I had everything on a thumb drive, and I handed it over to him. And then he says to me, look, do you have anything more on, because most of what I had was suspicious activity reports that had been analyzed. And he goes, do you have anything more specifically about Uranium One? We're investigating this, and we're getting stonewalled by the FBI. And I said, no. And he says, there's rumors that there is a intelligence report that would give the dates and times of what the FBI knew and when they knew it. Would you be willing to go back in and get that information for us? And I'm like, oh, crap. Are you serious? So I agree. He gives me these, basically an encrypted app to contact him through chat. And we tested out, works. And so my last day at the FBI, because, it took everything, to work up the courage to do it. I put it all on a thumb drive along with everything I had put on there before, and I carry it out, and I try contacting him. And
I got to ask you, though, man, my redneck mind just kind of goes, did your butthole get all puckered up during that time? Were you just
the whole time, brother? I was probably sweating. When I walked out of the bureau, I knew I could get stopped.
Now you walked out in physical possession
Physical
of
possession of classified information.
and now this was technically illegal then, right?
No.
Or because your courier
So
card you
whistleblowing makes it legal, and I had a courier card, makes it legal. But
whistleblowing makes it legal, but
it does. But there's this
reality winner
right,
or
yes,
Snowden or
right.
or
Well, here's
you know.
the problem. If I get, because I didn't go through originally, I didn't go through the ICWPA or the WPA, right?
Mm-hmm.
It puts me in the, in the precarious situation that if HPSI doesn't back up my story,
Mm-hmm.
I am screwed. I got nothing in writing showing anything at this point. But I've been asked. So technically, I was under the agency of the HPSI at this point, okay? Because they can provide you some protections. But now I get out and I've been cut off. So now what do? I got this classified thumb drive. I'm no longer at the FBI. I turned in my badge. I did hold on to my courier card, but the problem is now I'm screwed because I can't destroy this evidence. It needs to be seen by the oversight committee. So I reach out to a lawyer. Actually, the same friend that kind of connected me. I say, hey, I need you to find me a lawyer, and I need a lawyer like yesterday. And so I meet with this attorney, and I'm paranoid at this point. I'm like, I don't want to meet anywhere except in a public place, but where we can still have a private conversation. And so he said, all right, how about my church? I'm like, all right, that works. So we meet at St. Michael's Church, and he basically tells me, yeah, you're basically in the same situation as Snowden, except you haven't left the country. And I think at that point my face turned white, and I realized, oh man, I am in some serious trouble here. And then he asks me, he goes, are you independently wealthy? I go, no. I go, why are you asking? He goes, well, do you have any rich relatives? I'm like, no. And he goes, because I'm expensive. And I'm like, you can't do this pro bono? And he laughs at me. He goes, you're going up against Hillary Clinton and her cronies, the FBI's senior leadership, and Russian intelligence agents. No. That's way too much liability. He says my law partner would throw me out of the office.
And by the way, I'm not suicidal.
Yeah, right.
Trust me, I'm not
You,
going
in
to
fact,
hang myself.
did have information that could lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton.
Right. And so
Not only could have, should have.
should have. Yeah. And so I end up, he asks me all this, and I basically say no. And he says, well, I'll make a couple phone calls and see if maybe I can find some rich uncles to sponsor you or something. But he goes, I got to be honest with you. This is you're in a bad situation, and I can't take this on for free. And I went home that night and I wept. I got with my wife. I thought my life was over. And we got on our knees and we prayed and prayed and prayed. And 2 days later, I get a phone call from this attorney, and he tells me, he says, I went down to Nashville to talk to a woman who's independently wealthy, and she's an older woman. She's got more money than she needs, and I was hoping that she would maybe donate like $10,000 to kind of get a legal fund started for you. And she asked him after he told her the story. She asked him, how much is this going to end up costing this kid? He said probably $200,000. And she pulled out her checkbook and wrote a check for $200,000. At the end of this, with like several different attorneys, it ended up costing $198,000. That was God. There's no way that kind of thing just happens. And so that was the first kind of miraculous thing that occurred. And there were several other things that happened that were just amazing. But the second thing that was kind of really powerful was about 10 years earlier, my wife and I were living in Moreno Valley, California, and our church was doing this thing on learning to hear God's voice and all of that. And we were supposed to pray and fast and then write down what we hear. And I had written down one thing.
Did you say Roten?
Yeah, I did.
That was country, boy.
I know. I'm living in West Virginia.
It's
too
okay.
long.
Justin Timberlake at one time used the term "bleated" in a song.
Yeah.
I know it's not,
Yes.
never mind.
I use words like holler now too. So
I'm just happy that I understood exactly what you were talking about.
okay. So I wrote down go to Sakaris, and so at the time I got on MapQuest. That's how long ago it was.
The worst website ever developed.
Absolutely.
Because it always took me the wrong way.
And there was no place in the country called Sakaris. And I remember, and my wife even remembered because she was arguing with me saying, well, maybe you heard God wrong. Maybe it's Socorro, because there was like a place called Socorro, New Mexico. And I'm like, no, I know what I heard. I heard Sakaris. So I just kind of forgot about it. I thought maybe,
You weirdo.
I don't know, maybe I heard something wrong, or maybe I ate some, bad guacamole or whatever, but I forget about it. So remember, I didn't pick this lawyer. Somebody else found him for me. But I'm sitting in the car. We're getting ready to walk into Joe DeGeneva and Victoria Towsing's office, because we needed to get some legal counsel from a defense attorney. And Victoria Towsing, she was interviewing, or she was not, she was defending the other Uranium One whistleblower, I think, guy named William Joseph Campbell, who was an FBI informant that basically got left twisting in the wind with classified drives and everything, and he wanted to go public with it. So she's representing him. So we went to go talk with her. Before we went in, and by the way, at this point, I probably had an ulcer. I was so stressed out, so just nervous about everything, because I'm thinking, man, any moment I'm going to get whacked, or I'm going to get arrested or something. And we're getting ready to walk in, and I said, Michael, can you pray with me, please? And he said, absolutely. I didn't know if he was a religious guy or not, but I knew he was at least Catholic. He went to church, and so he grabs me by the hand and he prays. And the moment he says amen, all of a sudden I have this flashback of that memory from 10 years earlier, and I realize his last name is Sakaris, Michael Sakaris.
It's wild.
And immediately, all of a sudden, I just had peace. I knew for 10 years, God had been leading me down this road, leading me down this path, put me right where I needed to be, and I had nothing to fear. And so, from that point forward, he ended up working out an arrangement with the Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz, who turned out to be a stand-up guy. I mean, this guy went to extraordinary means to, number one, allow me to maintain my anonymity. Ironically, or not ironically, it's funnily, my there's another word there.
Funnily. Could you write these down?
Yes.
Yeah, take notes.
My lawyer.
So we're getting it all.
My lawyer, he puts down, on writing and everything, this agreement with the DOJ IG. And he says, my client will heretofore be called by such and such code name. And so I'm reading this document. It says MC POTA. And I'm like, MC POTA? You couldn't pick a cooler name than that? I mean, dude, I'm only going to do this once in my life.
Top
couldn't
secret.
Couldn't you
MC
pick
POTA.
like 008 or something,
Look, it's better than Deep Throat.
I guess you're right about that.
Considering the,
I think
the
you did
context.
say, "What would you prefer, Deep Throat?" And I'm like, no. But it's hilarious because I go, man, this, what does this even mean? And he goes, oh, you'll like it. And so you got to understand the background of this guy. So he comes to America at 14 after seeing his father put in a work camp by Castro. So he hates communists. And
Smart
so
guy.
so he names, he gives me the code name MC POTA, and I find out it means making communists pay out the ass.
I mean,
So I'm like, I love it, man.
Yeah.
I'm owning that.
Not bad.
that's a
not bad.
good one.
But so I mean that's the story of how I got through the whistleblowing, and eventually I ended up getting these documents to him. We had a clandestine meet at the St. John's Episcopal Church across from the White House. I go in wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, and I'm disguising myself.
Full Unabomber gear.
Yes. I mean, it was total sus. And I'm sitting there, and we get in there, and
Sus.
Trying to
Now
be
he's got a whole different language.
I do have.
we
I
understand.
do have
that,
Generation Xers.
Just went 20 years younger.
Millennials, and I got both millennials and was it Gen Z in my kids' age.
So really, you're speaking Gen Z redneck.
Sus
to me, is what it is.
Yes.
Sus means suspicious. So
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
okay.
I know.
So I'm sitting there, and Michael and I we get there early. We get on our knees and pray, and then he goes out, phone calls the IG, because they could still raid us right there. And he calls them. The IG honors it, sends his senior deputy to the church. Michael walks him in. I've been instructed to print out all these documents, so I have about this thick, double envelope written, secret, no foreign on the inside, all this jazz. We asked him if he wanted the thumb drive. He said no, because he said that I was able to maintain the thumb drive just in case the intel committees did nothing. I could take it to the Judiciary Committee. So I had it in a safe, and but I had
Hold on to that classified information and keep it on your person.
Yeah, right. I know.
sure you carry
wanted
it at
not-
all times.
I honestly, I wanted to get rid of it because I saw that stuff as long.
Of course you did.
It's like kryptonite, you know.
Yeah.
All it could stand to do is get me killed. So I end up. I had everything printed out, and so he walks him in, taps me on the shoulder, and I didn't want him getting a recording of my voice. I didn't want him getting my fingerprints. I didn't want him seeing, or getting a picture of my face. That's why I went to all the, things with the disguises. And so he taps me on the shoulder, and I hand it over to him over my left shoulder. And he walks out, escorts him out, and then we walk out. I mean, we leave, and I think I'm done at this point. We went through all these problems of having issues where first Jeff Sessions was the AG at the time, and he had recused himself from all things Russia and Hillary Clinton. So he refuses to give it a credibility rating, even though by law he's required to. So we're like 30 days in, and he's already supposed to have done this within 9 days. And we're like, what the hell's going on? And so the IG looks into it, and he's like, you're not going to believe this, but he said, I've never seen anything like this, unprecedented, but he's refusing to give it a credibility rating. So we're like, oh, great. And he goes, would you be willing to accept a credibility rating by me as the IG? And we're like, yeah. So he agrees to, he goes and he's got to verify the serial numbers of the documents and verify this is all legit. None of this is made up. Comes back, gives it a credibility rating. Then he gives it basically a rating of urgent concern, national security matter of urgent concern, and gives us authorization to take it to both intel committees. So we reach out to the intel committees, and the House, they get it, and they're like, oh, yeah, we got it. This is very valuable to our investigations, blah, blah, blah. Is he willing to testify? So my lawyer looks at me and goes, well, are you? And I'm like, hell no. I'm not going to testify, because the moment I walk in there and the Democrats see who I am, they're going to leak my name, and then I'm going to be constantly having to grow eyes in the back of my head for the rest of my life. No way. And I said, they don't need it. It's already been verified by the IG. But they then tell us that they don't want to take the information if we don't, if I'm not willing to testify. So we go back to the IG. He goes, ask them if they'll take it if I deliver it. So he clearly wants to see this get into their hands. And so they say, yeah, we'll take it if he delivers it. So he delivers it to both committees. And then I think it was like 4 months later, the House changes hands. Adam Schiff becomes the chairman. He buries the entire investigation. Yep. We found out like a year later that the Senate, even though they got it, the liaison got it, he shoved it in a file. It never made it to the Senate Intel Committee. And in the end, so like I said, 4 months later, Schiff takes over. A month after that, I get raided by 16 FBI agents that show up at my house. They end up, and I don't have any beef with most of the guys that were there. They were just doing their job, and they were polite. They knocked on the door. I got Mar-a-Lago'd. I did not get, they didn't kick in.
Didn't get Roger stoned.
I did not get Roger stoned. Okay, wow. And but they knocked on my door. I told them right at the door. I said, hey, I'm a protected whistleblower. But they come in anyways. And so I believe at this point I'm just cooperating with them because I got nothing to hide, nothing to hide. So I'm talking to him. This guy's interviewing me. He's asking me all these questions. Did you sell any of this information to, to foreign adversaries? And I'm like, no, of course not. I'm a whistleblower, man. I contact the IG. You can find out all this. And then after he's asked me all these questions and grilled me, then he pulls out a search warrant. And then I'm like, oh, crap. Mm-hmm. All right. We want you to take us over to your safe. Do you have any guns? Yes, they're all in my safe. Okay, we need to see them. So they start taking, then he tells me to hand him my guns. Now, I'm looking at this like later now. At the moment, I'm just obeying, but he could have shot me dead, He's asking me to hand him my guns. So I'm handing him my guns. They're writing all the serial numbers down on all my guns and everything. Then, they're going through my house. They're detaining me essentially in one room for 9 hours. 9 hours. They went through every room of my house. They took all of my electronics, and and at this point, I'm like, I think I need to call my lawyer.
So you're saying they wanted you to hand them your guns?
Yeah.
So you could have been holding it when they shot you and
Absolutely.
say, "Oh, he was aggressive."
Absolutely.
That is wild.
Yeah.
And in the moment,
Yeah.
It's probably nerve wracking.
Oh my
so you're
God,
not thinking straight.
No. And I mean, the only, and then they threatened to shoot my son's dog because his dog was, in his room, and my son's got Asperger's. He's got high functioning autism. He's freaking out. My wife wasn't there, thank God. Nobody else was there but my son and me. And they end up eventually taking all my stuff. And at that point, and I called my lawyer. My lawyer's like, "Don't say anything to him." And I'm like,
Too late.
I already did. And he's like pissed. And he's like, "What did I tell you? If the FBI shows up, don't say nothing." And I'm just like, sorry, man.
The assumption is that they're there to do something, good work, that you're protected, and so it does make sense as to why people do that. But
Sure.
anytime the government is at your door, don't talk to them unless you get a lawyer.
So the next thing that happens is of course we immediately get in touch with our defense attorney that we had spoken to ahead of time, just in case this kind of thing happens, and that she ends up asking for the search warrant. So I sent it over to her, and she's like, where's the Schedule B? I'm like, what do you mean? Well, I've never seen a search warrant before, so I have no idea if what they gave me is legit or not.
You want to go ahead and lay out what a Schedule B is?
Schedule B is what tells you what they're allowed to take. And I'm like, they never gave me that. I only had the, basically the front page of the, thing. So I think they did give me the Schedule A, which says where they can search, but it doesn't. The Schedule B is what says what they can take. And I know why they did not give me the Schedule B, because they took things that were not on the list, like my wife's, some of my wife's journals. I mean, personal journals. I haven't even looked at her journals. But based on the things that they took, it was clear what they were trying to set up. They were trying to set up, that I'm like some anti-government, conspiracist, that I'm, selling secrets to, enemies or something like that, or whatever.
Did they take your copy of A Catcher in the Rye?
No, but they took my copy of a book about a government conspiracy that had been written by a guy, Bill Still. And it was he had written about a conspiracy by Nixon to overtake, the government, to basically to plan a coup. And his father had been involved in that case, and so he had written a book about it and had signed it, and I had it in my possession. But that was the only book they took, and so I knew at that point they had been surveilling me, because my point of contact in getting me in touch with Devin Nunes was Bill Still.
So how long did this go on though? You said like 10 years?
No. So they it was like 2 or 3 years. So
Still
I didn't-
a long
Starting
time.
in 2016 and then
2017.
27.
Oh, that's right.
2017. 2017, October 31st was when I made my first disclosure to George Pappas. Then
it was during the Trump administration.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no way I was going to do this under a Clinton administration. Hell no, or even Obama. But I end up. It took almost a year to get to the point of being able to get those documents into the hands of both the intel committees, and then like I said, 5 months later they're raiding me. But I had seen the signals. I already knew I was being surveilled because I had all of the.
And the raid was coming in 2018 then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it came. November 14th, I think.
Okay.
And but yeah, it really screwed up Thanksgiving.
So does Trump not know about this at the time? And
No.
they're just not telling the right people.
No, he doesn't.
They're covering it up.
Trump had no. Remember, Trump's under investigation.
Jeez. That's
so,
right.
So they have no. They have no.
keeping him busy.
He's staying out of the FBI because he's under investigation. By all the people, by the way, that I'm ratting on.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's really a bad situation for me. But I end up this guy, the lead FBI agent who's involved, goes on his own personal witch hunt, starts going and interviewing neighbors and friends and people, and not just interviewing them and asking them benign questions. He's asking them questions that are kind of like painting this impression of who I am. That
Sure,
he's not.
sure. Leading question.
Yeah, leading questions. He's by himself, so that breaks and violates FBI protocol. You're supposed to always have two agents when they're interviewing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But he's there by himself. He's asking, leading questions. The guy's destroying my reputation in the small community of Union Bridge, where I'm at. when he doesn't get any dirt on me, he then starts going after my kids. He goes, they've been spying on me now, at this point for who knows how long. I'm guessing probably 2 to 3 weeks before the raid, they probably had surveillance taps on me and everything. And I had
Do you have any sense of what kind of surveillance were they monitoring was it like wiretaps, monitoring your emails and stuff, or
Yes.
what do you think?
I know for a fact that they had access to all of my social media, even private messaging. They had access to my phone. They were listening to my conversations. The reason I know that, by the way, is my lawyer, the day before they raided, he calls me up and he's like, hey, he starts off every conversation I ever have with him on the phone. This is a attorney-client privilege conversation, blah, blah, blah. And he says it just in case anybody's listening, but they don't care.
No.
So, but he says that. And then he says, hey, we need to get that thumb drive out of your house and somewhere safe now that we're done, doing all of this. And he says, so let's talk tomorrow about where we can do that.
Do you think that was the impetus to
Oh,
get
yeah.
you to go then?
They raided me the next day. So
Wow.
in the morning, I think it was 9 a.m. the next morning. And it started with 2 people show up. And I knew it was FBI the moment they pulled in because they had that, standard FBI haircut and walk. They get out of a white car, and they, sedan, and they walk up to my door. And so, when I let him in, the moment he pulls out the search warrant, all of a sudden, 14 more of them show up in my driveway.
So is it illegal at that point in your protected status and everything? Is it illegal to surveil you, or is it customary?
Here's the thing. So in order to do all of that, so we know that the FBI has been illegally using 702 to spy on people.
Yeah.
And that's illegal. The courts have said so, but nobody, there's no punishment for that. So
Right.
what do they care? But the other thing that was really strange was the Daily Caller breaks the story because the New York Times gets a tip, and somebody at the Daily Caller had a spy inside New York Times, and they were going to write a hit piece on me the next day. So he contacts my lawyer like midnight, like, hey, I've got word that your client's going to have a hit piece written on him the next day in New York Times. Would you please, consider giving me an exclusive, and we'll let you get your side of the story out. So he reluctantly agrees, and he gives them an interview. If you do a search for Dennis Nathan Cain whistleblower, and you'll find it. But yeah, so he ends up basically giving this interview, and then the story breaks, nationwide, international news even, and but yeah, somebody leaked my name to the press. And the Daily Caller then does a follow-up, and they do, that's the article right there. They do a follow-up where they actually do a FOIA request to the magistrate that signed off on the search warrant. And get this, a Clinton-appointed federal judge put a seal on an answer to a question that they had their lawyers look at and meticulously come up. The lawyers had come up with one question that they would ask that they found that there was no justification for holding back information on. And it was the judge notified that Dennis Nathan Cain was a protected whistleblower under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act? And a Clinton-appointed judge puts a seal on that answer, and then she seals her justification for putting a seal on that answer. I mean, it doesn't get more corrupt than that.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And it's a long story, but to just kind of wrap it up, this agent basically makes my life a living hell.
And this one agent, correct?
One agent.
Right.
He of course was spying on me, listening to, he knows that my son is 18. One of my sons is 18, and we're having that typical, parental, adult, issues that are going on.
Teenage angst.
Yes, and I had basically, told my son it's my way or the highway. He chose the highway, and so he moves out, and so he goes after my son, tries to work that, tries to talk him into wearing a wire against me. And the only reason I know is because my son and I have mended things, and he told me, what happened. While he's basically being, he's under a polygraph because he's trying to get into NSA, he gets, bamboozled by these guys coming in there, and this guy interrogating him. He ends up, it was horrible what happened. They pulled my daughter out of her class in high school. She's a senior. They pull her out, and some investigator from the sheriff's department, local sheriff's department, was asking her questions like, has your dad ever, touched you in your, private places
really?
and all this
Oh,
stuff.
gosh,
And
Jesus.
we're like, what the heck is going on here? So basically, we finally tracked down what happened. And they had said, oh, yeah, we've already closed the case. We talked to your daughter. Sorry. My wife's insistent on, no, I want to know who did this.
Yeah.
Where did this come from? And they tell her, well, we can't say who, but all we can say is that there was a law enforcement tip. So we know it came from this FBI agent.
Sure, yeah.
So they're trying to destroy my life. And at this point, I finally get sick of it. And the last thing that happened was my son, the one with autism, he gets... they come after him, and it doesn't end well, and so at that point I'm just like, I'm done with this crap, and so I contacted the Senate Judiciary Chairman's office, which was Lindsey Graham at the time, and I said, I need to come down with my lawyer, tell you guys what's going on. I'm being harassed as a whistleblower. I go down, my lawyer's there. We meet with his investigative counsel, tell him everything, and he says, okay. 2 weeks later, the guy's no longer an FBI agent. I don't know if they told him, hey, you need to retire. I don't really know if there was discipline or not, but he was not an FBI agent, and that I do have confirmed. And so after this, I decided...
You don't know anything more about this particular agent at all?
I know his name, and I won't say it, because I don't know what the legal ramifications are of that. But yeah, the guy was... Clearly, he was running his own op. And what's interesting...
Do you think he was running his own op, or somebody had him on an op?
I think somebody had him, probably.
Yeah, that would be weird to
otherwise-
hold a personal vendetta.
Yeah, no, but he was doing things off.
I'm
He was doing
not so
things
sure
off.
that it would be very weird considering the way that the Justice Department behaves nowadays.
He was doing things off book, without a doubt. And because one of the people that he interrogated called me and told me that, like, when he told this guy, to basically leave his property, and then as he's walking away, and he goes, why are you guys always trying to ruin, people's lives? And the guy turns around and goes, oh, you just watch too much Fox News. Just like, whoa.
So you think he was a raging liberal that had a vendetta for you, or do you think there could have been somebody else pulling the strings?
They were effing with me, and I talked to some. I still have friends, and I talked to some people, and I asked them. I said, hey, what's going on? And I even I got confirmed to me from somebody out of the Baltimore field office that they lied on the search warrant in order to get the search warrant. So they basically it was full-blown lies and fabrication. So, but it's like this world, of the classified, it's a dangerous world, right? Because, how do you even go public with something like that and not end up like Snowden or Julian Assange or, Manning, or it's a very difficult problem, because you have essentially, they can cloak anything, right, by just classifying. And this is what Kash Patel has been talking about, is that they overclassify things, and they do that on purpose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the end, probably the scariest moment, aside from the FBI showing up at my house, was I ended up getting poisoned twice. I had the lug nuts on my car loosened right before we went on a long trip. I had surveillance drones, landing in my backyard. I mean, it was crazy. The one time I go down to my car and reach under my door handle, and there's some sort of oily liquid under my door handle. I didn't think anything at the time. I just thought, oh, gross, I'm in an underground parking garage. I'm thinking, these sewer pipes or whatever are leaking on my car. So I just wipe my hand on my pants. I get in my car, and I'm driving home from D.C. because at this point I had taken a job with a defense contract, and I'm working, for the
You still
Navy.
had your clearance then?
Yeah, my clearance never got suspended. I immediately reported, my law enforcement interaction. I hadn't done anything wrong. They never brought charges against me.
Yeah.
So I still have my clearance. So I ended up leaving from work, and all of a sudden I had this like pain in the back of my head, like like right at the base of my skull. And I reach back there and it's like all swollen. And I'm thinking, oh man, I must have put my neck out or something like that. So I called my chiropractor. I'm like, hey, can you guys squeeze me in? They're usually pretty flexible. So like, yeah, sure. So I just drove straight there. And by now I've got a massive headache. I'm not feeling well. I got like brain fog. The chiropractor goes, I don't think this is your vertebrae. It's like you got some swollen glands back here. You need to go see a doctor. So I called my doctor's office because I hate going to the emergency room because it's like you're going to be there for 3 hours.
Sure, yeah.
And good luck if you get in. So I called them and I'm like, hey, can you guys fit me in? And they said, we just had a cancellation. If you can get over here in 10 minutes, we can see you. So I get over there. And by this time, now I'm having slurred speech. I've got ataxia, so they're doing this thing, and one eyeball's moving, the other's not. I can't walk in a straight line, so they think I'm having a stroke. So they're like, you need to go immediately to the emergency room. So my wife at this point has met me, and so she drives me to the emergency room. And they do an MRI, they did a CAT scan, and they did I think a EKG, and they said, we don't see anything. So, go home. And I still have symptoms. So, go find they refer me out to a neurologist. So we find one of the top neurologists in Washington, D.C. I go meet with this guy. And
This is the next day?
I think it was like maybe 2 days or 3 days later.
Okay.
So I meet with this guy, and we have, he does MRIs, MRAs with and without contrast. He does EEG, everything, like every kind of test you can imagine. And at the end of it all, he goes, and this is 6 weeks later, I still got symptoms. And he's like, I got good news and bad news. He goes, the bad news is I don't know what's causing this. He goes, all of your charts don't explain any of this. He says, so the good news is you have pristine arteries. There's no plaque in your arteries. Your brain is pristine. Everything looks great. And I had been taking this vasodilator for a while, supplement. And I'm pretty sure, it's opening up my arteries and veins and stuff. So, and I'd taken it about 2 hours before this contact. And I don't realize until this moment that that's what happened, because he says to me, he goes, I'm really, he says, if your job was different, I might know what this was. He said, I've only had one client that had charts just like yours, all of the symptoms, and he goes, but your job doesn't make sense for this. And I go, well, what did he do? He says, well, he worked for an industrial chemical plant, and he touched some chemicals with his bare hands. And I'm like, right then, oh crap, I know what this is.
And the symptoms lasted that long after touching the?
Yeah.
Did you clean off the thing that you touched? No. So do you believe that you continued to touch this?
Well, it absorbed through my skin.
Sure, yeah, but what I'm saying is so you touched it one time, rubbed it off on your pants or whatever, probably got more that absorbed through your clothing. But as you continued to get in and out of your car,
possibly,
there was residue. Do you believe the residue? That's why it persisted?
It's very possible.
Okay.
But it also could have just persisted because it could have been a long-acting thing. I don't know. But that's a good question. I don't know. But prior to that, I had had another incident about 2 months before where I ended up, same type of situation, end up in the emergency room with heart attack-like symptoms. And in that case, I had walked into my office and there was like a dust, like a very light film of dust on my desk. And normally I left my door unlocked, but that day I come in and my door's locked. And so I had to get the spare key to get in. And I brush off my desk and immediately start going into AFib. Now, I think now, and at the time I didn't, again, I'm just thinking, man, I'm under incredible stress. This must just be stress.
Sure.
But now that I think back, I'm thinking it was probably, and I've talked to, of course, a number of, experts in this sort of thing. In fact, I contacted the Carlson Institute, which they do all the poison testing for the FBI, and sent the guy my charts and everything. And he's like, look, you were probably poisoned with some sort of neurotoxin.
Get anthrax
and then more like some sort of, there's
It's a bioweapon.
Yeah, they have 14 different chemicals that they know of that can cause those symptoms just by touching them. But he also mentioned that the other incident that I had, could have been fentanyl. Could have been some sort of, stimulant or something like that. But yeah, I just so that happens, and then about maybe 3 months later, I'm back to normal. I'm feeling good again, And we have this trip that we're going down to go down to Kentucky. And of course, we're talking on the phone, with people about it. And so somebody knew. And we get in my car and we're driving down there. And my son, he's like, Dad, I hear a weird noise coming from the car. So we pull off at a gas station and I walk around and every lug nut is all the way at the end of the post except for one. One lug nut is holding that wheel on. And, we drove
Front or rear?
Front right passenger side. So if you think about it, I'm doing 80 miles an hour on the
You
highway.
lose control if it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been devastating.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, I'm like, all right, man, we're done. We're moving. We got to get the hell out of here. Because I had somebody show up at my house and, YouTuber or whatever shows up there and he's got filming me as I'm driving up my driveway, gets my license plate. He's telling everybody where I live, and he's talking about, and making up bullshit that he looked at my resume or something on LinkedIn and is making all these assumptions that just aren't true.
Do you have any information on that guy?
George Webb.
George Webb, okay.
Yeah. And I called him out on it on a show much later, and that was an interesting conversation. But yeah, so I think it put my life at risk, and so I ended up we ended up selling our house and we moved to West Virginia. I wanted to live somewhere where I knew I was going to be able to protect myself and own guns, lots of them.
Yeah.
So
I don't blame you.
So that's what initially drove us here, and we ended up moving in by just pure happenstance. We sold our house and we ended up in a hotel for about 3 weeks while our house was taking time to close, and we ended up moving in the day after the election on 2020. So it was like I couldn't have gotten out of Maryland at a better time.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Nate Cain is a pissed off American soldier.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Tyler, what is how did you these two stories are dramatically different. The kind of line in through them is that they're both former military, former government, involved with the government.
Yeah.
How did you kind of link these stories together as a filmmaker, and also what are some of the other people that are involved that you kind of brought into the fold to kind of actually create the story for the whole movie?
Yeah, I think that was one of the hardest things was like, what story do we tell? So we had Glenn's story, which was obviously, corruption at a more local level. Mm-hmm. And then we had several other people. I mean, there's a ton of people in the documentary, and you did what, about
20, 25 minutes, something like that, maybe.
But I mean, interviews.
Oh, interviews? Oh my gosh, we've got 23, 24 hours of interviews.
Yeah, hours and hours of interviews. So in the movie, the people that made it into the movie are like Ivan Raiklin, who was somebody that was going to be here, but he's doing something else today. But there's probably 10 different people in the film that we actually interview and that are in there. And, Nate is just maybe a 10-minute part of it because his story obviously takes, 12 hours to tell. However,
and that's just part of it. We didn't even get to the deep stuff.
I know. So, so anyway, there was a lot of stories to weave. So really what I had to do was go through all the footage and figure out like, okay, what is the through line that actually kind of ties all these people together? And there was many, but the ones we decided to talk about in the movie, Finish This Fight, Diary of a Pissed Off American Soldier, is DOJ corruption, which obviously both of them have that in their lives and their stories. And then we also talked about, are you familiar with Craig Sawyer?
I'm not.
Craig Sawman Sawyer. He is
SEAL Team 6.
Yeah.
Has an organization right now called Veterans for Child Rescue or Vets for Child Rescue.
Right.
And he's pulling kids out of child sex trafficking. Actively involved still yet in raids. In fact, I was talking to him the other day, was going to be on a show with us. He's like, dude, we're getting ready to kick a door down.
Yeah, I mean, he's literally doing this regularly, like on the daily type of thing. Like, so, we talked about that a little bit. We talk about DOJ corruption. We talk to people on the street too. We do some man on the street stuff, just like, hey, is the American dream alive? How do you feel about that? So there was a lot of things, but what would you say like the biggest themes were that came out of it for you?
Well, the DOJ, obviously, the mainstream media, my gosh, if Trump did anything right, he did. He did a lot of things right.
Yeah.
I wasn't a fan really before he ran for office, but when I saw the world come after him all of a sudden, I knew something was there. So, and the guy's got cojones the size of this table. But he exposed the corruption. And, they're not even hiding it anymore. It's to the point like, well, we don't care. What are you going to do about it? So we talk about the mainstream media. And people like Tim, people like us, people like Nate are the media now that's coming out with the truth. And what we even talked about in the movie is going to the sources of truth, and that's what we did. So Craig Sawyer, John Tig, an amazing guy. Do you know him?
Yeah, he was in Benghazi.
Yeah, John's a great dude. Was left to die on a rescue mission.
Yeah.
By Obama and Clinton and the CIA. So we really just found a lot of other pissed off Americans. Shamika Michelle, would love to bring her here. Shamika is a young black lady. Well, I don't know how young she is. She looks amazing. In North Carolina, was raised and was brought up as a Democrat, and had her own aha epiphany moment through these last 8 years, and is now a speaker in the walkaway movement. So she's a pissed off American mom. Got a friend, Debbie, that's down in Florida, Debbie Ferris, Chinese, born in Panama, raised in Venezuela, educated in Mexico, and a United States citizen. Now that's quite a combination.
Yeah, she's very,
and has come to the point where she sees the corruption and the communism trying to creep its way in here, to the point that she's developed an election integrity group in Florida herself, took it on herself to do, that actually pushed legislation through Tallahassee to help Florida have better elections. So we brought that kind of awareness to people. This is the kind of thing, we're in a movement. And Nate and I actually met the first time at Reawaken, a Reawaken show tour down in Miami. But there's a lot of people that don't go to those. There's a lot of people that won't go to those. They don't want to hear the rah-rah about what's happening. They just want to hide, and they're going to watch the mainstream. They're going to watch what people tell them is truth, and it's really probably not. So we developed Pissed Off American Soldier because I think it's an intriguing title. People are going to want to see it, and they're going to hear things. Not a lot of people's heard Nate Cain's story. I've introduced him in the movie as probably the least known American hero that I've ever met in my life, and his story needs to be told. But it's also hard to swallow. It's hard to believe that a government that I fought for has the capability of doing that to a man that fought for them as well. Has the capability of doing what they've done to me. Mm-hmm. Maybe we signed a dotted line at some point, and you as well, I think, signed a dotted line that at some point up into our lives was what we were willing to risk, and yet can be treated like that. And so we bring an awareness through these stories, but we're also giving hope because we are America. We still have that spirit. And there are people like Nate and people like you and people like Tim, people like Travis and people like myself that are willing to stand up and take a risk because we got a target on our backs again when we're doing this. I've already been blacklisted on social media again because of this movie. They can kiss my country butt. I don't give a crap anymore. I'm going to do what I feel like God's told me to do. This country was founded on godly principles. It was founded on freedom, and we don't have it now. We have a form of it. We're fed enough to keep us complacent. But, guys, we are so close to losing stuff. It's scary if you know the truth.
Yeah. I guess to answer your question, there's a lot of through lines in the movie.
Yeah.
What I like about it is something that you just mentioned is that, we go through his story. We go through several other stories. We show that mainstream media obviously has an agenda, is obviously lying. And we show that I think we do it fairly cleverly as well. It's not just like, they're lying, listen to us. It's like, hey, we're going to show you, walk you down that path so that you actually see it in front of your eyes instead of just like taking our word for it, you know? And there's several people saying the same thing in the movie. So there's confirmation, but we also literally show it. And I think what I like about it is we've done it different than most documentaries. And at the end, we do tie things together, like you said. And we do bring hope and like some practical, hey, what can I do now? Or, you know, what does that look like in 2025 and beyond? Like, how do we change instead of just complaining about it? I think that's the biggest problem, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's on X, everybody's on Instagram and complaining about it. A lot of people just want to sit down and just, well, you know, I'll just consume. I'll just be a consumer and sit down and do nothing. So there's very few people like actively doing things, but I think we give some hope at the end of like, at the bare minimum, you can wake up and start saying something, or wake up and, if you're a believer, pray about it. Like, get activated somehow, and there is hope. You know, there is hope. So, and I think people like us are kind of bringing that hope of an awareness of mainstream media is not trusted anymore. I mean, Timcast is getting more views than most of the mainstream media combined at this point.
Yeah.
Their numbers are embarrassing. I mean, CNN is like going down at this point, right? It's like they're not even going to be a network in 4 years.
Well, they were beaten by the Food Network recently, but I mean, to be fair, everybody does eat.
That is true.
If you're going to be fair, but yeah,
slamming hoagies on there.
they were beaten by the Food Network. All right, so we've been going for just about 2 hours. Why don't I get some final thoughts from you, Greg?
Well, my final thoughts are simple. I love God. I love my country. I hate what's going on. My mission is to bring awareness. That's through music and now through this movie. And people ask me, I get this all the time when I get a chance to go around the country and talk about freedom. What can I do, Glenn? And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know what you can do. And I'm going to be willing to bet you probably went through this at some point not long ago. I don't know what you can do. I thought I knew what I could do. Truthfully is I don't know what I can do either. When I heard that still small whisper of Glenn shoot a movie, and I said yes, my whole world opened up. And I don't even know that we're even touching the tip of what we're going to be able to do together.
Right.
But here's what I'll tell people. Don't close your eyes. Don't sit back down. The fight is just beginning. Yeah, we won the White House, and we did that, I believe, because people stood up for the first time in a long time. Don't sit down. It's the very beginning of keeping what we know now as freedom and bringing back some of the good stuff that we've lost. We don't want the bad stuff. We don't want to go back to the 60s with race riots and people worried about being equal and not being segregated. That's not the good stuff. The good stuff is when I was a kid and we get to go outside and play until the lights come on and then we go home. You're not worried about being trafficked. You're not worried about being drive-by shot. You're not worrying about all that crap. The wholesomeness, the goodness of freedom. So we've developed this movie to help maybe make that a step that can happen for America and for me personally. I'm tired of this crap myself. So finish this fight, Diary of a Pissed Off American Soldier. Go get it. And oh, by the way, 50% of the profit is going to be used to help a paralyzed veteran walk again.
That's great. That's great to hear. Nate, what do you got?
You know, the quote, all that is required for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. My challenge to anybody that's watching this is to remember that. And when they see something, you know, don't just say something, do something about it. You know, don't ignore it, because we are where we are today in terms of the wrong that is going on in this country because of complacency. And we're all guilty of it, even myself. When we have an opportunity to do something about it, we should. And we owe it to all of those that have come before us and that have, you know, paid the ultimate sacrifice for this country and for our freedoms. So that's one of the things that I appreciate about this movie is that it has a positive, you know, it has a positive push in there. And I think that we can do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Nate? I'm sorry, Tyler.
Travis.
Travis, my bad. Apologies.
It's Travis Conver. No, I these guys have heard me say this before, but it's so true. America, the major export in the United States is culture. right? We import everything, and I think we're even importing electricity at this point. It's insane how we just consume the whole world's resources as American people, but we export culture. We export music and movies. And if you're watching this and you don't already know that, you know, the main people that have been in Hollywood for the last several decades are pedophiles and baby killers and all these things. If you don't already know that, newsflash, that's what's happening. These elitists like Puff Daddy and all these people that are now it's finally coming out. These are the people that have been running an entertainment industry for a long time. And when you are living in a society like we are, where the dollar is king and you get to vote with your money, like if you believe something, when you believe in something, whether it's an American company or whatever, and you spend your money there, that's how you vote and that's how you get rid of garbage, right? So when you go to watch these Hollywood movies and just consume and entertain yourself with pedophiles and garbage people, you're voting to say, I want that and I like that and I want more of that in our country. Or you could go to finishthisfight.us. You could buy this movie for $11 and show those people and show the world that we want the truth. We want to actually invest in good quality entertainment made by good quality people. And instead of perpetuating the trash that's out there, start to create some new awesome content. And look, we're going to make government espionage feature films based on true stories. Nate Cain's story, starring Travis Conver. And we are going to make that movie, and that's going to be an awesome government espionage badass thriller that people are going to go and watch as entertainment, but it's going to have true real life stories behind it. But when you go and you buy this movie and you buy the other things that I'm making and people like me are making, you're voting for that. And you're saying, that's what I want. You're voting for the Donald Trump of film industry, right? The Donald Trump of entertainment and movie making. And we're going to start exporting positive culture to the world. I'm so sick of what we're exporting now, which is just garbage. It is, we want Dwayne Johnson's next piece of content that has no soul, no life, and is terribly acted. Or we want to vote for something good. So if you have $11, the movie I think is worth way more than that, but I think it'd be a great thing to watch. And you're also voting that you want more of this in the world. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I do have a spoiler about the movie, though, and we're talking about garbage and things like that in Hollywood. He, as a director, did convince me to do a topless scene.
It was necessary for the story, Glenn.
This is exciting.
Listen,
Very
when he got arrested, he just had shorts and a
Exactly,
flip-flop.
yeah. But thank you so much for having us here today, man.
yeah.
I've enjoyed the time.
Glenn, thank you.
Travis.
Travis, thank you very much. Nate, I think I called you Tyler earlier.
I'm not offended. You know what?
Well, don't worry. Kellen here will take care of the editing, and he'll
I think it's
smooth it
funnier
over.
that way.
That about wraps it up for us. Keep an eye out for clips coming up all week, and we will see you on Monday.